Alright, today's lesson is going to be on 2-2/2-3, adding and subtracting with real numbers. And for this, we have a big chart that we have to fill out. For a lot of you, this is just review work. So, we have two charts, one on top of the other. So for each of these, you may want to write some tips to yourself on how to complete these problems. The first one is just an adding statement. So an adding statement like 5 plus 3. Fairly simple. 5 plus 3 is 8. You could rearrange that to say, write it smaller, 5 plus 3. You could rearrange it to say 3 plus 5 equals 8. And what's important to note is that these are two positive numbers being added together. And with addition, you can flip them around. You can add them in either form. It's called the commutative property with addition. So the next box over here, we have a negative and a positive being added together. And the negative is the first number. So for instance, negative 5 plus 3, which is going to equal negative 2. And then negative 3 plus 5 equals positive 2. And so a tip for that is when you have a negative and you're adding a positive, whatever one is bigger, if the negative is bigger, then the answer is going to be negative. If the positive is bigger, then the answer is going to be positive. Right, the next column, we have a positive, and then we're adding a negative. So 5 plus negative 3. And in your book, they'll usually write parentheses around the negative 3 like that. So 5 plus negative 3. And what you do with this problem is a lot of people will just take the plus a negative number and change it into a subtraction statement. But in this case, 5 plus negative 3 is going to be 2. Or 3 plus negative 5 is going to be negative 2. Similar to this up here, one of the important things to notice is that if the positive number is bigger, then the answer is positive. If the negative number is bigger, the answer is negative. And also, you may also want to note for this one that adding a negative is the same thing as just subtracting. So you can write that in that column. And the last part of the addition section is a negative plus a negative. Negative 5 plus negative 3. What you're doing is you're taking two negatives and you're saying suppose that you're talking about distance. If you go negative 5 backwards, so if you go 5 steps backwards and you go 3 steps backwards, how many steps backwards is that total? That would be 8 steps backwards, or negative 8. You could think about it like that. Another way to think about it is in terms of money. If you are $5 in debt and you're $3 in debt, how many total dollars are you in debt? So the other way around, negative 3 plus negative 5 is going to do the same thing. That's going to equal negative 8. And again, like this one over here, you may want to note that adding a negative is the same thing as just subtracting. So if you wanted to change these problems to negative 5 minus 3, you could. Or negative 3 minus 5, you could do that as well. You'd get the same answer. One last note for this one. up here, you added two positive numbers. That made it more positive. Down here, you're adding two negative numbers, which makes it more negative. So, in the first section of subtraction, you have a number minus a number. So 5 minus 3, which is 2, or 3 minus 5, which is negative 2. You may see a similarity between this one and this one up here. And what you'll notice is that if we were to change plus negative up here to just minus, this section would look just like this section. And what that means for this section is that if you have minus 5, you can think about that as adding a negative. And if the negative is the bigger number, then your answer will be negative. And the next section is a negative subtracting a positive number. So negative 5 minus 3, or negative 3 minus 5. Is that right? Yeah. And with this one, negative 5 minus 3 is going to be negative 8. Negative 3 minus 5 is also going to be negative 8. This box is similar to this box, which means adding a negative, you can change this just into subtract. And when you're already at a negative and you're taking away more numbers, that means you go further negative. Right, now the last two boxes. The first one is a positive number subtracting a negative number, so subtract negative 3. When you subtract a negative number, to think about it logically, you could say, if a negative number is like being in debt, and subtracting means to take away, what happens when you take away a debt? If you owed me money, and I were to take away what you owe me, that means you would start to go in the positives. Because if you didn't owe me money anymore, then you would be that much amount richer. So, subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding. 5 minus a negative 3 is 8. And 3 minus a negative 5 is also 8. You might see that this section and this section up here are the same. Why? Because subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding. The last section is a negative minus a negative number subtracting another negative. So, for example, negative 5 minus negative 3. These two negatives make a positive. So you have minus 5 plus 3, and that's going to give you negative 2. The other way around is negative 3 minus negative 5. That'll give you positive 2. Which means this section and this section are the same. Alright, so some general rules you should always remember. Some tips for adding and subtracting. The first one, this is the first blank you have to fill in, is get rid of plus, minus, or minus, minus, and turn those into, this becomes minus, and this one becomes plus. The second one is you can think of all these addition and subtraction like a number line. You find a starting point, then you find how it changes, and then you find your end point. And your end point is always the answer. So if you started at 5 on the number line, and you went 3 steps upwards, you would land at 8. So try out those examples, see how it goes, and if you have any questions, ask me. Thank you very much.